Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high-functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. Listener discretion is advised. Anger played a pivotal role in feeding my bipolar disorder and depression, as well as complicating social and emotional matters through my high-functioning autism. In this mini-series prefixed on anger, I will be exploring the role anger played in my mental wellness and how it was used as a weapon to manipulate me as a straight white man from a blue-collar working-class background. This is episode 20, on anger. 5 things I wish I knew as a 13-year-old straight white boy. I remember when I was 13 years old, undiagnosed with bipolar disorder, severe depression, autism, trying to make sense of the world. All through the lens of psychosis that I was drifting in and out of. I did not get it right a lot. And there are things that I could only learn the hard way or learn with the passage of time. I'm 46 now, and I want to share with you 5 things that would have made my life much easier. The first thing is that even back then, the culture was being shaped to steal the future health and happiness from young men like me and you. And it's far worse today. This country and system were built to benefit white men who buy into the system, but that system is crumbling. For a long time, I operated with the assumption that everyone else experienced life like I did, and I could not be more wrong. The idea of traditional masculinity is largely a lie to sell that dream. If you think of traditional masculinity or patriarchy, imagine a long table with a man sitting at the head of it. He's supposed to be the provider, protector, and the king of his castle. He's supposed to be stoic in the face of fear, isn't supposed to show weakness, and God help you if you do. Because if you do, then other people will lose respect for you. They'll think you're weak, and they'll see you as a target. It's an impossible standard to live up to. In my life, the more I tried to live up to this impossible standard, the angrier I became. Things just didn't seem to work for me, no matter what I tried, so it created frustration, resentment, and anger. In turn, the unspoken social contract was that we would keep the people seated at our table in line, and we would reap particular benefits for that. The problem is that it goes too far. There are different aspects of traditional masculinity that are good and healthy. It's good to be independent, strong, reliable, and able to handle yourself when shit hits the fan. But it's also good to be kind, considerate, soft, and empathetic when the moment demands it. The problem with suppressing your emotions over a long period of time is that your brain doesn't know how to just separate off one particular emotion. Instead, emotional suppression is more like building a wall in your own brain that everything struggles to get through. It took me years of therapy to attempt to sort of fix that issue. And it's kind of hard to unmake decades of emotional suppression. Plus, my emotional landscape is atypical for my mental illness to begin with. The way that many people frame the problem is that you can't have a bunch of fucking sissies all in their feelings while shit is going down, right? But the problem isn't being strong in the moment. It's shutting down the emotions and never opening the door again. Even if I can't be emotional right now, later on I may go and sit down with some sad music or reflect on the experience to do something that will help me open that emotional door so I can actually feel my feelings instead of just burying them. The second thing I wish I'd understood better was the dynamics of straight relationships. There's this narrative that modern feminism ruined women. They say that women hate men. Manosphere influencers and media highlight women's anger and fear to reinforce their point. That is, they want women to sit down, be quiet, and listen to the patriarch at the head of the table. Most women do not hate men, even the angry ones. Many are scared, but mostly, I think they're just largely disappointed at the absence of masculine character and integrity we've all been led to believe exists. Imagine you've been told all your life by society that you need men to protect you from other men, and then men elevate other men who are accused of sexual misconduct into the most powerful positions in the land. So you never know which men are dangerous and which aren't. What you tend to hear about most in manosphere circles are things like men getting destroyed and divorced or stoking fears of false accusations. Do those things happen? Sure, they happen. You have no idea if the love of your life today could destroy you tomorrow, or someone could fling a false accusation at you. On the other hand, you have women like Jessica Serrano, who tried to leave her abusive boyfriend. And in response, her boyfriend broke into her family's home, laid an ambush, and killed 3 of her family members, as well as a 4th bystander, as retaliation. Stories like that are always in the back of the minds of women. Here's a fun fact that's not fun at all. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, homicide is the leading cause of death among pregnant women in the United States. Now, if you're a boy and you have that fear of divorce or false allegations in your mind, think about what kind of emotions you have about it. Now consider if you were in the shoes of a woman, except instead of false allegations or losing assets, the threat was losing your life, losing your child's life, or the people you love being gunned down. With that in mind, start listening to what women say with that new emotional context, and it will take on a whole different meaning. The third thing you should know is that patriarchy and traditional masculinity is not built for people of color. Again, if we go back to the metaphor of patriarchy being like a long table, there is no world in which racists want a person of color sitting at the head of that table. The founding fathers, mostly slave owners, did not envision a country in which that would be possible for blacks, Native Americans, or anyone else who is not a white male landowner. The narrative spin is that we need to gut protections to level the playing field for fair and balanced representation for white men. But those protections exist because our parents would not give fair and balanced opportunities to black folks. And many white folks still don't want to. Many of these strides were made in the 1960s, and there are plenty of people who are still alive right now who fought against civil rights then. The people doing this aren't trying to balance the playing field like they claim. Instead, they're using guys like me to try to push the country back into a past that's long gone. They're trying to strip away political power that has allowed this country to make the little progress that it has. And it took me a long time for me to understand these things, because it's not like they teach it in school. They teach you, I have a dream, and pledge allegiance to the flag. And that leads me to the fourth thing you should know. You often hear white people, and some people of color, say things like, racism would go away if we just stopped talking about it. No, it wouldn't. It can't, because anger feels amazing, and it's hard to unlearn a habit you've had for decades. That's not something that's going to spontaneously happen, and it certainly won't happen in silence or darkness. Furthermore, the idea that racism is a problem that has been solved really doesn't have any basis in reality. Why? Well, because the government and society at large really hasn't done much to make up for the sins of America's past. There are several white families who built fortunes off of exploitation of Native Americans and black slave labor who still have that wealth, power, and influence today. How are we supposed to move on from racism when we haven't rectified these sins? How can we say that racism is no longer a problem until real effort is made to try to balance the scales and pay for the sins of our forefathers? And you may be thinking, but I haven't done anything to anyone. No, you probably haven't. But that doesn't mean other people aren't still affected by the policies and actions of our ancestors and the actions of white racists today. People of color are rightfully angry, sad, and defensive about that. Furthermore, that's why you shouldn't say the N-word flippantly. Now, the N-word is a word that represents centuries of hate, oppression, and marginalization of black folks. It's not just a word. It will never be just a word because that word isn't just a word. It's a weapon. It's a weapon that white people have used to dehumanize black folks for centuries. To even consider the N-word to be just a word is an example of white privilege, which is a phrase that you will undoubtedly hear a lot. Billionaires and politicians have made life hard for everyone. So if you have a hard life, you may think, well, I haven't had any privilege. My life is hard. But that's not what it means. White privilege is just a way to say that you don't have to worry about the same kind of problems as people of color in society because of your skin tone. That's it. I was ignorant to that fact for a long time, and I bristled at the idea that my life was easy because I'm white. I've been fortunate in many ways, but I also have this mental illness that's been trying to kill me since I was about 13, with all the fun that goes along with that. And finally, for my final point, I lived the majority of my teenage and adult life as an angry man due to my mental illness, social difficulties in life. Here's what I need you to understand. Peace and happiness cannot live in the same brain that is constantly drowning in anger. There is so much anger poured out into our world, into the media, into your brain, because anger keeps you activated and engaged. They give you people to be angry at, women, minorities, other white people who don't believe in their system. But understand that there is no direct path from anger to a peaceful and happy life. Instead, anger is a treadmill, and you'll just keep running and running and running until you're utterly exhausted. There is no end to the anger because the people who benefit from it do not want it to end. If it ends, then they lose their power and control over you as well as income. Now, personally, I only fell off that anger treadmill incidentally. I fell off of it because I experienced a psychotic break that caused me to want to project my rage outward at other people. In my twisted perception, I reasoned that since I was miserable, had never been happy and would never be happy, why should anyone else? And then my brain gave me a plan to make that happen. Luckily, I crashed out of that unwell cycle before I could act on the thoughts. But the thoughts still terrified me to the point where I decided if a mental health professional couldn't identify anything wrong with me, I was going to kill myself that night. Which, in retrospect, was a pretty big red flag of its own that I probably should have mentioned to my mental health professional. It's been a long journey, unwinding decades of conditioning and beliefs, pulling myself apart to understand why I am who I am. It certainly hasn't been easy, but you can do yourself a favor and avoid all of that and years of self-isolation and alienation by questioning everything. Why do they want you to be angry? Why do they want you to be afraid? What do they get out of it? Because they aren't doing it for no reason. The answer is simple: money, power, and control. Not all anger is unhealthy or unreasonable, but you can't live in it constantly and maintain a healthy mind. Perpetual anger causes isolation and depression, which causes more anger and repeats in a cycle. And it's a hard cycle to break. So I hope you'll take this information and just avoid that trap altogether. Thank you for spending your time with me. And I'd like to thank Anthony Scafacci of the Scafacciverse podcast for the episode idea. If you enjoy irreverent dude bro humor and sports video gaming, check out his podcast. There's a link in the bio. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast and share it with someone you think it might help. Consider leaving an honest rating or review on your platform of choice.